All right, welcome to the show. Today we have a special guest with us. We have Deputy Dan from the Opportunity Party. Would you like to introduce yourself a bit, Dan?
Yeah, kia ora. Daniel Ebb is my name, Deputy Leader of the Opportunity Party. I'm also the candidate for Kaipara-ki-Mahurangi, which is electorate just north of Auckland. Got a bit of a sort of farming background, spent some time in the army, run a business, got frustrated like a lot of people that politics isn't delivering. 4 years ago, welcomed my little daughter to the world, which just like cooks your brain as to what your priorities are. And I find myself here trying to circuit break politics.
So why have you chosen Opportunity?
I think for most of my life I've been politically homeless. I've voted pretty widely across the spectrum. Some of those sort of personal experiences push me right.
Yep.
I love the authoritative hierarchical environment of the army. So I was
True.
like, sweet,
Yep.
totally I'm a righty. And then increasingly I'm becoming sort of infatuated with permaculture, regenerative agriculture, food systems, that kind of thing. Pushes maybe a little bit more left.
Okay.
And I've never found a party where I've been comfortable coming as my whole self with
Yes.
these somewhat contrasting and conflicting values and experiences. And I think in Opportunity, I've actually found a party that actually values that diversity and is comfortable holding conflicting ideas together. I've never really experienced that in a political environment before.
Very nice. So I'll set the line of questioning here because our audience is young people. So can young people trust Opportunity given that you have quite literally no track record in Parliament?
Yeah, sure. I'd flip it back to you and say, can young people trust the established parties considering
you
their
might say
track
that.
record in Parliament?
Yeah, I figured that'd be your answer.
But yeah, I think that's a valid question. You know, we know that we're coming in unproven, and so we already started to plan for how we show up in our first term. You know, that's going to be the litmus test. But you know, what I often tell people around sort of trust and deciding who to vote is vote for the party that makes you feel hopeful for the future, and that's about as good as I think you can get when it comes to voting for a political party.
Yeah, very fair. All right, I'm going to start with probing about you a little bit. So if you'd entertain this line of questioning.
Sure.
In 2019, following the mosque attacks, you authored a New Zealand Herald article published to your Dirt Road Comms website as well as on the Herald.
Cool. Nice. Done your research.
That New Zealand needs a year of national service. Do you still personally believe that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to counter that national service isn't sort of putting everyone in the army. I thoroughly enjoyed my time in the military, but I'm cognizant that that's not a fit for everyone. But I think some of the lessons and values you take from that, like teamwork, self-confidence, a focus on personal development, even just like a commitment to fitness, that kind of thing, is valuable. But aside from that, I think what is desperately needed is a mechanism to help particularly young Kiwis get out of their bubbles. There are multiple different types of New Zealand right now.
Yes.
And I think the more that we sort of reinforce our own understanding of New Zealand, because I hang out with the people that I hang out with from school who all think the same, who all kind of vote the same, who all dress the same, who all kind of have similar life patterns. That's one slice of New Zealand,
Yes.
but I believe we become stronger as a society when we can create lifelong friendships and connections with people from different types of New Zealand, and we all can kind of show up together.
So there's a real reason I asked that question. So it's not really about the policy itself, because it's not an opportunity policy at all, I believe. So the reason I ask is because you see the institutional parties, particularly Labour and National, don't let their candidates or MPs say anything much away from the party line. So the reason I asked that question is I'm wondering if Opportunity would allow their candidates and their MPs to discuss their own ideas whilst obviously only pursuing the actual party line. I think your answer's answered that, but if you have anything to add.
No, I think that's fine.
Yeah, I'm glad you answered that way.
We're all human beings, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
As long as I'm not going off on some tangent.
Yeah, exactly.
Launching, building a new cancer hospital or something on your show. But
yeah. Well, it's really refreshing to hear that. I have one more question about something you've personally published. So you published on a 2-speed produce plan. Do you still believe in that sort of idea? And if so, how would that work?
Yeah, cool. So you're referring to my Nuffield report, values-led redesign of domestic
and you've
food
also
system.
published on Stuff and your own Dirt Road Comms website.
Correct. Yep. So I still back that. I think it's one of these things that people get really confused, where how can we export 95% of particularly the meat, milk, and to a lesser degree fruit produce that we produce in New Zealand, but then at the same time 25% of kids live in food insecurity, and our health statistics when it comes to lifestyle disease, diabetes, obesity are frankly appalling. And so how can we both be this incredibly rich, productive, land of food and fiber, but also be really unhealthy? And so my research was an attempt to understand that, particularly from a food and farming angle. And effectively my thinking was we're asking our domestic food system to participate in a system that's designed for export. There's nothing wrong with that. We're really, really good at it. We should absolutely keep doing it. I'm not suggesting for a second we stop trading or anything like that. But if we want different outcomes for our domestic food system, that's not value capture, it's health, it's connection back to taio and whenua, it's helping young kids build a relationship with nature, it's community connection, it's environmental restoration. Like, food can do all of these things, but yet we've sort of just designed for it from the value capture perspective. And so the research was a bit of a thought piece that said, well, what happens if we thought about food from some aspects more like a public good, like we do education or healthcare. Right. Education and healthcare in New Zealand is effectively considered a right. It has sort of multiple ways that it operates. It has sort of some private markets. It has a public market, but it's designed to achieve baselines. Every kid gets educated. Every kid gets healthcare. Everyone gets healthcare. And so it was a thought piece as to how would redesigning food to achieve those health and environmental and community outcomes look like.
Right. And so your idea was, I believe, and correct me please if I'm wrong or clarify more, you wanted a sort of local food system within communities, towns, where the local farm sold into the town directly? So butchers?
Butchers is one of them.
Fruit and veg stores?
Yeah, there's no sort of one size fits all with this, because like a food system is massively diverse and complicated. Anyone who's tried to map them knows that intimately. So it would be about creating a whole lot of different options. So your everyday family could potentially get their fresh fruit and produce from multiple different places. One could be a local co-op, that they have maybe a stake in the farm itself, and so they go and visit the farm all the time. If young kids build a relationship with the farmer and maybe help out at harvest time. That's something that happens in European places. There could be like a sort of publicly funded fresh fruit kai box, which maybe uses seconds from traditional distribution networks. Urban gardens and urban farms is a big one. Like if we can grow a broccoli, like I'm looking right now at 10 square meters of lawn.
Absolutely. Which is hardly used.
Which be hardly used. You've got to mow it. That could be turned into broccolis. You want to create this rich diversity of food gathering options for families, some of which may be publicly funded, most of which would still be in the private market. But we need options. It can't just be Woolworths.
Well, that's why I asked, because how do you avoid supermarkets undercutting that system?
Well, in that instance, you'd probably be able to undercut the supermarkets.
Well, I mean, my point being, you've seen with Air New Zealand, for example, if we use a different example, we've had little carriers come in, and what Air New Zealand does is they put their planes on those routes, undercut the price until that business goes out of business, and then they raise the prices back up. And you can see we used to have, especially when I was young, I remember we had butchers, fruit and veg stores everywhere. There's some butchers around. I mean, even Mad Butcher in Dunedin just closed because it can't afford to be open anymore. You're tough to find a fruit and veg store. There are a few around, but certainly they aren't known for being the cheapest compared to a supermarket, if not comparable to a supermarket, in which case supermarkets are more convenient. So I just wonder, like, I love the ideas, but how does that work practically with this oligopolistic supermarket system?
Well, you need a good watchdog. And so this is where I can now sort of dovetail into some policy. But as part of our breakthrough economy policy plank, we want to give the Commerce Commission greater independence and more powers to intervene where monopolistic behaviour is happening in markets. Supermarkets is absolutely one of them. Like we know the land banking's there, we know vertical integration is there. The Commerce Commission report from 2021 makes all this stuff abundantly clear. the problem we have when it comes to sort of getting the rules right in these markets is that the Commerce Commission can put out these reports, but it rests on government to actually do the intervening.
Absolutely.
And so we want to say, give the watchdog the teeth to actually act on their own reports.
And they would have a mandate from the government as to okay. Yeah, I mean, most people who've studied economics have known for a long time that the Commerce Commission is underfunded. Would this look like forced breakups?
So that would be up to the Commerce Commission.
Right.
Again, we don't want politicians making these decisions
Absolutely.
because a lot of them will happen for point scoring, and you'll be kind of, politicians don't have a great track record of thinking long term, frankly.
Yes.
As an aspiring politician, I'm happy to admit that.
Yeah.
So that particular policy would include giving the Commerce Commission the power to take individual businesses and sectors to the High Court, and they would have the ability to break those sectors up if push came to shove.
Interesting. I guess we'll get into your tax policy now. So let's start with citizen income. So it's there to provide a financial cushion. Then why is that universally necessary?
That's a good question. We generally tend to err on the side of universality,
Right.
because it's simple.
Right.
The moment you start getting into, well, what is and isn't capital gains, for example, is the moment you start creating loopholes. Accountants love it.
Yeah.
And suddenly the system starts to, it's just not becoming as efficient, right?
Right.
And so, one of the sort of benefits of that is that we can sort of simplify a lot of the back-end structures. A lot of the stuff
Right.
can be done with code,
Okay.
because you're just basically connecting census data to IRD data and plugging in some
Right.
software, and away you go. And so, yes, in some instances, will some people get the universal basic income and not necessarily need it? Yes, but we believe that the simplification benefits across the whole of society outweigh some of those fairness questions.
Okay. Because to some people it seems bizarre to give individuals like Peter Thiel, I think you may be familiar, he's quite contentious at the moment, the founder of Palantir. He's worth $42 billion and will be gaining an extra $19,400 a year. But you see that as justifiable because it reduces the backroom cost, the loopholes.
Yes, but I think it's important to note that the citizen's income sits alongside a land value tax
Right.
and some tax threshold changes. So someone like Peter Thiel would be, assuming that he owns property, which I think is a pretty safe assumption in a place like New Zealand,
Yep.
he would be paying a net
Right.
higher tax rate.
For sure.
Yeah.
Have you costed the savings on what it would save to simplify? Yep. So it's significant.
Significant, yeah. I believe it's $1.7 billion in administrative savings across about 8 different departments.
I suppose there's another element to that, and I think might be a bit of a redundant question, but why not just give a tax break?
Yeah, that's the fair question. And it's something we actually have considered and taken to the election on as a party previously. I guess what we were trying to do here is particularly when it comes to the land value tax, is create different settings and different dials that we can dial up and down. So the citizen's income itself becomes a dial. So you could dial it up, for example. So say there's a economic crash or AI job losses become quite excessive. You can dial up the citizen's income quite easily and quite quickly dial it down again. Same thing with land value tax. If prices move in an unexpected way, you can dial it down, dial it up. The fundamental problem that we're trying to solve here is that currently we've got a very narrow tax base. Really, we only tax income in New Zealand.
Right.
And so we want to create sort of more almost like foundational pillars of tax as a building, make some more foundations, and that gives us more options.
Do you have any case studies, examples where something like a citizen's income's happened overseas perhaps and it's worked?
Yeah, there's a couple. None at the scale that we are proposing, so that would be a world first. But we've seen citizens' incomes work in Ireland specifically for the arts sector.
Okay.
That's been a sector that's always been a sort of a struggle to do well in and to struggle to survive in. That was a universal basic income pilot that has now been enshrined into regular practice.
Okay.
So they've kept that as a pilot. The Marshall Islands is an interesting one that's just kicked off.
Right.
That's every resident of the Marshall Islands, I believe, is getting something like $250 a month, maybe.
Okay.
So a little bit less than what we're suggesting, and there are some significant differences between us and the Marshall Islands, but that has generated quite a lot of economic activity right off the bat.
I suppose a final sort of right-wing concern there for people who are that way inclined would be, would this not see a reduction in productivity or labour force participation as people essentially, because it's on top of the benefit, I believe?
it replaces benefits.
It replaces benefits.
It replaces job seeker benefit,
Right.
and which is the main benefit class
Yeah, of
outside
course.
of the pension. It replaces the pension as well. There will be a top up to ensure that no pensioner has anything less. But effectively, what we're doing is taking a welfare system
Yeah.
that is, I mean, you guys are probably on student allowances and stuff. Like, you have to navigate the system
Right.
every day. What we're taking is a very overloaded bureaucratic system where you're asking questions like, "Oh, how many nights did your girlfriend stay over? Did you get the accommodation allowance?" We're taking that and we're taking it and we're replacing it with a line
Okay,
of code.
so would you, if you were on the pension, or if you're on, say, student allowance, would you see similar amounts of income to what you currently have?
On the student allowance, you would see slightly more.
Okay.
Probably depending on your circumstance, maybe about $50 to $70 a week more.
Okay.
Pension, you'll see no change.
Okay. Interesting. And you don't think this will have an impact on labour force participation?
Listen, it may in the short term. We are acknowledging that this is a big, bold, transformative step. And that's why we have a 10-year transition plan with like multiple sort of pause points to see what unintended consequences are, see how markets are reacting, dial things up, dial things down, go slower, go faster. We're a very pragmatic party. But from what we've seen from overseas experience, that the UBI in the long run tends to actually improve labour market participation. Because I mean, think about yourself, right? Let's say you come out of uni and you desperately need a job. You've got to start making some coin. You've got to start paying rent.
Yeah.
You'll take the first job you can get.
For sure.
But maybe that's not a good fit for you. Maybe you actually need to get the third or fourth job that comes your way because it's a better fit aligned with your passions, aligned with your talents and your experiences. So suddenly, instead of being an underutilized asset at that firm, you now become a star employer because you're doing the job you actually are passionate about. Right?
Okay.
So that's the kind of thing that a cushion can do for you. It also gives you ability to retrain because now you've got some additional income, so you could go do a quick graphic design course. You're not like sort of forced to make ends meet and just working to get by. You're working to actually step yourself up in life.
Okay.
Because you need that security blanket.
I do have a few more questions about that, but I'll move on since you are rural. You come from a rural background. I guess I'm going to ask you some specifics, and this is not to have a gotcha, but just to prove that you've thought it through and costed it.
Yep.
So a family I know owns an 82 hectare farm in South Waikato.
Cool.
Under your 0.5% rural land value tax, do you know approximately how much additional tax a farm of that size would pay each year? An 82 hectare farm.
All right, so 82 hectares, South Waikato.
South Waikato.
Dairy farm?
Beef and lamb.
Sheep and beef? Okay, yeah, cool. All right, so that's land value. I'm going to take an absolute sort of pie in the sky here, but that sounds to me like a farm that would probably be under the national sale average, which is around 6 or 7 million. Let's say it's around about the average. But at that size and at that location, at that business model, you're probably lower. Our projection is that farms at or below the national average sale price of between 6 and 7 million will see no significant tax changes, potentially a small tax cut. That's after you take into account that family living on the farm get universal basic income.
Right.
Often farms are intergenerational family affairs, so you might have a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, 21-year-old, so you now have 3 adults, potentially 4, working on one property. The land value tax, as you said, there's a slightly lower rate for rural land, 0.5% versus 1.75% for residential land. So you take that into account. Also take into account that conservation land held privately on farms is excluded from your taxed land value. And so once you take all those things into account, you generally see very minimal changes for a farming family.
So, I mean, I guess what I'd ask there is, are you deliberately using the land value tax, just yes or no to this, to reduce land values?
Yes.
Yes. But land values are also the tax base that funds citizens' income.
Yes.
Have you accounted for that feedback effect?
So again, that's why we have a 10-year transition plan to double check how things will operate once sort of the market can actually price in something like a land value tax, and it'll be signaled years in advance as well. So, this is sort of where our ability to generate predictions
Right.
is limited. We are
Okay.
a team of volunteers after all. We haven't got any
sure.
access to the internal treasury documents, that kind of thing. So that's probably the limit as to what we can project. Yeah.
Do you know, of the 1.7 trillion total value you've identified in your policy, do you know what percentage will come from urban, what percentage will come from rural?
Sorry, 1.7. You're talking about the land value tax?
Yes.
Yep. We probably have that somewhere, but I haven't got that figure on top of my head.
Okay.
Sorry.
I suppose when you say, so you've got the land value tax on farms, for example. You said farms are intergenerational assets, right? Now you know the low overheads of operating, sorry, the high overheads of operating a farm. You've
Yeah, it's a hard business.
It's a hard business.
Really
Now
hard
you're
business.
now you're introducing a land value tax. You are deferring for the first. I believe it's only for once you introduce it, the first owner until they pass away will be deferred until they pass away or they sell the property, right?
Correct, if you're a pensioner.
Will
Yes.
that not affect the ability to pass the farm on to the next generation with this higher cost? Will the next generation not be forced to sell at least a portion of the farm to afford the land value tax?
In that instance, so there's a couple of different points to raise here.
Right.
One is not every farm is an intergenerational farm, and there's some actually quite good data to suggest that around about 2/3 of farmers encourage their kids not to go into farming because the returns are so bad, because it's a really high pressure lifestyle, despite the fact that they love the farm, innately, it's a part of their identity. So I think that in itself is a bit of a warning flag that some of the fundamentals of our agricultural business models aren't quite right. So then there's another piece here, which is, what about the young farmers who want to buy in?
Yes.
So for them, a drop in land prices of 10% is the difference between being a manager your whole life on a corporate farm and owning your own farm.
Okay.
So right now there's multiple sort of interconnected problems in the agricultural sector, and this is a sector I love deeply, so it hurts me a lot to sort of raise
I
these.
have minor agricultural background. My grandparents working on a farm. I
Most
worked on
Kiwis
it for
do.
a year.
Yeah.
So I've got a little bit of experience. Nowhere near
a
yours,
little bit
but
of calluses on your hands. That's good.
yeah, a little bit.
So in something like sheep and beef, we're looking at a average age of a sheep and beef farmer is 60 years old.
Yeah.
That 60-year-old sheep and beef farmer is operating a business model with an average return on investment of 2%.
Right.
Like, these are not good numbers.
No.
They indicate some kind of a death spiral if things don't change.
Okay.
And so the way to create an upward spiral instead is to ensure that the next generation of young farmers can get onto the land. That requires land value to come down to make that more accessible. But then there's another piece to this puzzle, right? It's not all just about land value. And there is a good line of critique out there, is like, you can't tax your way to prosperity. And absolutely, we completely agree.
Right.
You have to have a tax system that makes sense and is fair and creates the incentives. But the other side of the puzzle is our breakthrough economy piece. And I actually like to think of the tax reset, which is the citizens' income, land value tax, and our KiwiSaver 2.0 itself sitting next to the breakthrough economy. And so the breakthrough economy is a massive uplift in spending in R&D and innovation. And by the nature of our economy and the role of groups like the Bioeconomy Science Institute, a lot of that will flow into agricultural investment. And it's also a big uplift in our polytechs, which by nature of their locations often are sort of hubs of innovation for the rural sector. So we want to lift incomes, we want to lift the value of farming, we want to make farming more profitable
Through R&D.
Primarily, and we also want to make and also things like our Commerce Commission will drop building costs, farm appliance costs, those kind of things. So we want to make those businesses more efficient, more profitable, more valuable,
And younger.
We
Right.
also want to
By increasing the cost for older people, though.
well, the cost will be applied to the land, not necessarily the people on the land. So yes, I agree there will be an additional cost to spend, but again, that young farmer is also getting universal basic income.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's keep that in mind. And again, it's only farms above the average sale price of 6 or 7 million will really see some tax burden increase. And the final piece I add to that is that we also want to do things like create biodiversity credit markets or carbon sequestration markets, which give farmers alternative ways to use their land and generate income from it.
Yeah, so I'll ask you one question about that. Carbon credits for pine forestry, you against that?
Correct.
Just native
Natives
bush.
only. Correct.
And farmers can have private conservation land and exempt it from land value tax.
Correct.
That sounds very good. You mentioned KiwiSaver, so I want to jump into that.
Yep. These are great questions, by the way.
Thank you. Well,
like,
actually,
seriously, this is like the most highbrow interview I've done. That's really good.
well, we don't get paid, so if you could give a shout out. Did you consider releasing an alternative budget this year? You see the Greens and ACT release alternative budgets. Like I can see there's costing in your policies. Absolutely, we've read them all. But why not just release a full alternative budget? Of course, it's not going to be the exact figures, but
that's capacity.
Right.
Like every single person on our policy team is a volunteer who works after hours.
Right.
They're already cooked.
Yeah.
Trying to do the bog standard policy release stuff.
Yep.
And all the sort of responding to questionnaires and that come with it.
Okay.
So just we weren't able to.
Okay. So with your KiwiSaver, one of the main ways for a young New Zealander to get a house deposit today is by withdrawing from the KiwiSaver. Mm-hmm. Your KiwiSaver policy makes 6% of every pay for both the employee and employer contribution compulsory and explicitly bars withdrawing it for a first time. You'd offer a loan against the balance instead. So for our generation, would you say this policy is built for us? And aren't you removing one savings tool that we can actually use to buy a house and handing us more debt in its place?
I'd argue that the best thing we're going to hand you is a residential property market that comes down between 10 and 15%.
Okay.
Like what's the average? I mean, even now my KiwiSaver kind of sucks. Like the average KiwiSaver, I believe, is about 60 grand.
Right.
Like what would you rather have? Early access to your KiwiSaver, which is maybe, at your guys' age, 30 grand, maybe, as a down payment on a home that's worth $1 million,
right,
or a home that's worth $800,000.
I mean, that's fair, but why lock it away?
Why lock the KiwiSaver
Why not allow people to take from there? Why not give the choice? And also, why lock us into a higher...
Because compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Like, if you want to have... KiwiSaver should be what it's designed to be. We're asking it to do a lot of things right now.
Yep.
We're asking it to be your first step into a home. We're asking it to be your retirement savings.
Okay.
At some point, we do have to remember what its core principle is.
Okay.
And the whole reason of the KiwiSaver 2.0 plan basically is to give us an off-ramp away from a superannuation fiscal cliff.
Okay.
And so it makes sense. I do see the sense of the logic in allowing it to be a source of deposit for a home, because home is a lot of security.
Well, I think your point is understandable. I guess one more thing on that: is it fair to lock the young people in at 6%?
It works in Australia.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I acknowledge that it will put some people under pressure. Again, we're also going to want to do this. Under the umbrella of a UBI, of the citizens' income, which gives people some more, 70% of New Zealanders will get a tax cut under the UBI, which means that you're in a position to invest in your KiwiSaver and invest for your retirement. Well,
I mean, this is why I'm sort of probing in this, really. So your policy, KiwiSaver 2.0, builds a $1 trillion pool to bring down the future cost of super, as you're saying, but it's today's young workers who will have around about 12% of the income locked away for 40 years, whilst also during this decade-long transition still paying the taxes that fund current retirees' pay-as-you-go super. So that's our generation. Aren't we effectively paying for retirement twice, once for our grandparents' generation and then for our own generation once we retire? Yeah.
I mean, that's a very astute observation. And I think it speaks to the fact that it's really, really hard to be a young person today because you're kind of bridging between two worlds, right? Where superannuation was considered a right and, baked into the government budgets. And now we're trying to move to, and that is unsustainable. And there's not a politician in Parliament who will tell you that superannuation under the current scheme is sustainable. No. And so you're sort of caught into two worlds, because we now have to build the off-ramp to get away from that sort of treatment of superannuation. And a part of that is, and we're broadly aligned to like the National Party, even New Zealand First, we kind of share some similar outlines of our KiwiSaver policy. And you're absolutely right. You are a generation that is going to have to take the brunt of that transition, just like you had to take the brunt of a housing market that went out of control, just like you have to take the brunt of climate adaptation that we've been kicking the can down the road on, just like you have to take the brunt of productivity that hasn't been sorted in the last couple of years.
Which is why we're all leaving to Australia.
Yeah, and that's why you should all vote opportunity because mate, I really genuinely think, and I say this confidently and honestly, I genuinely think that your generation has been quite severely failed by establishment politics. And if I was in your position, I would also be considering Australia.
I think you'd struggle to find a young person who disagrees with that statement.
Well, honestly, just to finish that,
Yeah.
that is one of the primary motivations that drives this party.
Right.
Because we call ourselves youth adjacent. So I'm 39.
Right.
Like, I don't know the challenge that you guys are going through, but we recognise we have a sort of that old adage that kind of sits in our back minds a lot, which is, societies do well when people plant trees under the shade of which they'll never sit.
Absolutely, yeah.
And when society discounts and deals out of, its businesses and housing and all that kind of stuff, when it deals young people out of that access to security and assets and the ability to play well in society, it shortchanges its future. And so, we are pretty unashamed that we are standing up for your generation, because you bloody well need someone to stand up for you.
Absolutely, and I mean, you're sitting here in my lounge doing this interview right now, which says a lot. Also, your eyes are the colour of your party. I found that funny.
Actually, like a baby blue.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Well, I'm colourblind, so
okay,
it looks the same to me. I got a question on your affiliation.
Should we just go on a date or something?
If you're paying.
Yeah, fair enough.
I
do have a house, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, this is the question, right?
Yeah.
Affiliation. Your leader, Q, on the 24th of June, stated, "Our first principle is to negotiate first with the party that gets the largest number of votes in the election." She said, "I think that's a tradition that enables stable politics, and so that's the approach we would like to take." Does this imply, based on the polling at the time, and polling right now, that Opportunity would first seek to form government with a Labour Party?
No, it implies that we would start negotiation with who had the majority of the vote share day after the election.
So it's party, not largest, and I get
it's
that
largest
no
coalition,
coalition.
not party.
So coalition then?
No. So the
Vote
party,
share,
the party with the
largest
party
vote
with
share.
the largest
Absolutely,
vote share.
yes.
Yeah.
Because my point being, the right bloc has a larger amount of votes as a bloc.
Sure.
The Labour Party has a larger amount of votes as a party.
Yes.
So you're not looking at bloc, you're looking at party.
Correct.
The traditional way, I suppose.
The traditional way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I get that that's, there's no rule book that says we have to do that. It's
absolutely.
This is a bit of a vibe, but there should be a prize for winning the most votes. Most people kind of feel that inherently. So that's
as a party and not as a bloc. That's the thing, though. And there's a reason I ask this, because as I see, one of the greatest threats to your entering Parliament is your voters' preference on coalition blocs. I.e., a centre-left voter may not wish to see you form government with centre-right. So how do you overcome that concern?
Hey, that's a good question. That's a real challenge for a new party trying to navigate its way through Parliament. And we have always said that our number one commitment is to maintain the ability to work constructively with both the left and the right of Parliament. We will not pick a side. And
but you do
reinforce one. Yes, you have to pick a side to be in the coalition, but we're not going to do what a Greens or an ACT have done and say we have tethered our colours to the left or the right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
For the simple reason that New Zealand does not need that. We're not going to all chuck in our families and businesses that we've worked so hard to build and spend time with, just to reinforce the problem.
I found Gareth Morgan, which I'm sure you're aware with, his idea very, very interesting. Which rather than entering a coalition, his position is that the party must stay in opposition and be free to promote and vote on legislation according to its individual merit. He says, Opportunity forming a coalition would force them to support policies they otherwise would be against in order to meet the coalition agreements. He says Opportunity must still maintain its confidence in government. As such, it wouldn't collapse the government, it would stay in for its full term. He says that they would vote on legislation based on its merits. Opportunity would assess each bill on its own terms and vote accordingly, backing good policy regardless of which side proposes it, and opposing bad ideas the same way. So what's your opinion on that idea?
There's definitely some merits to sitting on the crossbenches.
Okay.
But there's also some disadvantages, right?
What are those?
The disadvantages are that, we have some good policies that we really, really back, and we think that this is a pivotal time in New Zealand's history, and we need transformative ideas. And so when you sit on the crossbenches, yes, you can sign a confidence supply agreement and allow budgets to pass,
Yes.
but you really limit the ability to actually introduce new ideas and new thinking into the political discourse and onto the legislative table. And so,
But you do get to choose which ideas go through, essentially. You
do
become the kingmaker, but not for government, but for the ideas, right?
Yeah, you're right. That's a good interpretation. So you become sort of this gateway for existing legislation, but you lose the ability to really stamp your mark on Parliament. And so, it's now go 3 years ahead. And so now we're saying, hey, New Zealand, we did a good job of being the gatekeeper, give us another go. Or do we take what would some consider additional risk, because joining a coalition, you now have collective cabinet responsibility.
Sure.
Yeah, but that comes with the ability to actually introduce
Yeah.
new ideas, new legislation. And so, if we want to earn New Zealanders' trust after 3 years in government, do we take the additional risk that comes with sitting in a coalition to actually instill some things that New Zealanders can look at and say, opportunity did that. They're worth keeping in Parliament. So there's significant risks and drawbacks to both approaches.
Okay, so you'd be more, and this is more just a statement, you'd be more inclined to sit in a coalition whilst still isolating yourself from the other parties as opportunity, not opportunity, the left wing, opportunity, the right wing.
Correct.
Okay.
Always maintain the ability to work with both parties.
All right.
That's really important.
So a contentious topic that sort of died down at the moment, co-governance.
Okay. Oh wow, blast from the past.
Yes. The reason I ask this is because your website is very vague on this issue. I mean, it's not the most contentious for our generation, but certainly for older generations. And I find it fascinating, and I think you will see this happen, that particularly the right-wing parties haven't capitalised on your sort of vagueness around this. So you say you'll repeal the Treaty Principles Bill and Marine Coast Area Bill. Obviously, Treaty Principles Bill wasn't passed, if they were passed. You want to include Aotearoa history, including Te Treaty, in all of his education system. I'm sure most people will agree with that. Support growth in the numbers of qualified te reo teachers. I'm sure most people will agree with that. Support the devolution of services, and support equitable treaty settlements. What does that actually look like for opportunity?
Sure. So that's an unreleased policy.
It's on the website.
Yes, I know.
Right.
But it sort of gives you an indication.
Okay.
Like those things will be in the policy, but we haven't released the final policy document, which explicitly lays out all those things in detail. We've included those things because we think it's important for people to have an understanding of what the sort of outlines of those policies before they actually get released. So I can't go into too much detail, except what you've sort of already
No problem. I've got a bit of a question around what's your stance on mining? What's your guys' stance on mining? Just start with that.
Sure. So we oppose all seabed mining.
Right.
We've looked at the evidence and we don't believe that seabed mining can be worth the extractive cost and environmental damage that it incurs. But that said, we are not naive. Like, we want to do a renewable energy transition. We want to increase our innovative capacity. All that is going to require material and rare earth minerals. So we are open to mining, but we're open to mining done under specific guidelines and guardrails.
Okay.
There's three main guardrails for us. One is environmental destruction. We're pro. Effectively, we want closed shaft mining instead of open shaft mining. They have varying vast differences in terms of their environmental destruction that those two employ. It's not to say we'd only ever do closed instead of open, but understanding and managing environmental damage is really important to us. We're a Thiel party.
Right.
The second is, if we're going to mine, let's ensure that profits stay in New Zealand as much as possible.
Right.
The royalty rates that we're operating under are way out of kilter with other extractive economies. So if we're going to mine, the profits must stay here. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, is local voices need to be heard. The decision to dig or not to dig must be made by those communities themselves. Because they will be the ones bearing the cost and also bearing most of the benefit.
Because I think there's a lot of contentiousness in mining at the moment, between one side and the other, between we can't mine it all or we need to mine everything.
No.
And
there's a middle ground.
There's the middle ground where, I mean, if we don't mine here, we're mining in Indonesia, for example, which is dirtier, human rights violations sometimes occur.
Yep.
We can do it cleaner, but we can do it right. And that's your guys' position?
Correct.
Okay. So infrastructure, I'm just going to ask you about the cost of it. Sure. Because your policy criticises passing the cost to the future with infrastructure, right? Yet you propose $60 billion in debt serviced over 50 to 100 years. The people paying that off are today's teenagers, people not yet born, people our age who are 20. How is that different from the generational buck passing you attacked, except it sounds nicer?
Good question, man. Yep, you're right to pick this up because it's a question that deserves a lot of good attention and good dialogue. So I think there's two different types of borrowing.
Okay.
There's kind of borrowing, to use a household as an example, there's borrowing to get a mortgage, fix your roof, buy a car, and then there's borrowing to buy groceries. So capital expenditure versus operating expenditure. So we wholeheartedly reject the notion of borrowing for operating expenditure.
Absolutely.
That's a fiscal path that takes you over the cliff.
I'm glad to hear that.
But we definitely support smart borrowing for capital expenditure. And so the deal that we want to make with your generation is, yes, when it comes to capital expenditure, we are prepared to use our very strong balance sheet internationally. We have between AA and AAA bond ratings with all the major rating agencies. We at 45% debt to GDP ratio. The OECD average is 112.
Yep.
So we're actually in quite a solid position. We can borrow safely. But yes, we will hand on a higher debt bill, but that debt bill will come with rail, hospitals, sewage that works, water that gets to you.
Right.
It's the fundamentals that your generation need to build the next economy. You can't do that with infrastructure.
So you see it as you just don't have another choice, really?
Well, either that. I mean, it's like, what would you what would you prefer? Would you prefer a slightly lower debt bill but crumbling infrastructure that you have to fix anyway, and it's probably going to be more expensive to fix in 20, 30 years? Or should we lean into our responsibility as leaders now to fix the infrastructure, granted that may increase debt burden on you? Okay.
Well, we need to wrap up, so I'll ask one last question. There seems to be a lack of youth-specific policy, and this is I'm kind of referencing those lollies that are there to, drag voters and grab them. And I'm not too mad, personally, that you don't have a lot of those sort of policies around. But I'm thinking, for example, university-specific policies or direct home buying assistance policies. Though I'll admit, and when it comes to universities, I appreciate your guys' emphasis on polytechnics. Are there more youth-centered policies to come? Do you think you've got enough offered? You're not going for those sugar hits. What's your stance on that?
Yeah, good question. Sugar hits aren't really in our DNA.
Yeah.
This is probably where we code a little bit more right, and we lean a little bit more right. Like, we are a free market party,
right?
And so we are adverse to adding a government program or adding a new sort of payment to grab a slice of the vote here. Those are tweaks and tutus that, if you do them enough over time, you get what we've got, which is this quite sort of bureaucratic morass, and things become inefficient. We back, particularly the free market, to operate under the correct guardrails. And so we are much more interested in having a conversation about universal basic income, citizens' income, KiwiSaver, long-term innovation pipelines. We're going to massively increase our spend on R&D, for example, which will flow down to universities. But we'd much rather have those kind of debates than one additional year of university free. Like, to me, while granted that's incredibly important to you guys, in the scheme of a society, I don't think that's the right way to actually bend the curve to the productivity, the fiscal sanity, or the environmental restoration that we all want to see. Those are big pieces of structural reforms that need to be done.
But your R&D investment, will that be going to unis as well?
That will be So, despite what I've just said, universities will see a significant uplift in R&D spend as part of our breakthrough economy. So that is, make sure my numbers are right, but I believe it's $125 million into research and development support. We want to double the spend into deep tech incubators and those kind of schemes.
So basically you're funding uni more, R&D. Essentially, indirectly.
Yes.
But it'll be mostly postgraduate study, because that's where the research happens.
I think that's a fair assumption.
Okay, yeah, all right. Well, thank you very much, Daniel, for coming in.
No worries. Hey, like I say, Those are really good questions.
Thank
I'm
you, Dan.
genuinely blown away. That was awesome. You guys have done your research. You give a shit. Excuse my language, but
hey, we're free spoken here.
You clearly care. That was a very impressive interview. Thank you.
We've both made it through the whole interview. I'm not the first one to swear for once, so that's great. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that you guys have our generation in mind. It's refreshing to hear. Even if you're not in government, I'd love to hear more youth, just us in mind in Parliament. So thank you and best of luck.
No worries. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Good on you.